I thought of revisiting this game, since the last time I visited it was a long time ago, and I didn't really like that one that I made. So I kind of decided I'd come back and just re-explore Sagas, Dragon Ball Z Sagas, because it's infamous. It's very infamous. If I remember correctly, Dragon Ball Z Sagas released in the year 2005, and it released on the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and all that other good stuff. It was a beat 'em up, and around this time, if not actually before it, on the Game Boy Advance, released another game. The Legacy of Goku series, Boo's Fury, released about 2004-ish for the Game Boy Advance, and it was a similar idea of exploring the story of Dragon Ball Z through various playable characters. And I'll have to talk about the Legacy of Goku series if I haven't talked about it plenty enough already. But I loved the Legacy of Goku games. I played them over and over. I even loved the first one. That was very clunky at the time, but there's a cheat code that you could put in up, down, left, right, BA during the starting open animation sequence, which will give you God mode for Goku so that he never dies. So you could just go in and play however you want and just fly through it in an hour or two, and the story will be over and the game will be over. It's a fun time. It's not the best game. It's in Legacy of Goku 2 when things get really interesting, and Boost Fury is a little bit better, but a little bit worse at the same time. I think Legacy of Goku 2 is the perfect sweet spot. It's one of my favorite games of all time on the Game Boy Advance system. And so, when I finally learned that in a trailer that we were going to be getting a PlayStation 2 game where you could play kind of like Legacy of Goku, running around, destroying stuff in free, open, beat-em-up fashion, I was thrilled. I was excited. I was over the moon. It was 2005. I was young but old enough to want some carnage. And when this game came out, admittedly, I had not played a crap ton of games, so my expectations in comparison to whatever was coming out at the time of 2005 was not as big as most other fans. But looking back on it now, 2005 had us loaded. Everything from 2000 to 2005 on the PS2 system was loaded with tons of amazing games. If this game came out in the year 2000, it might have been a little bit more forgiving. But being 2005, what we received was inexcusable. This was made by Avalanche Studios, the same company that would go on to develop Toy Story 3 for the PlayStation 3 and other systems besides. I'll be talking about Toy Story 3 eventually. I will be talking about Toy Story 3. But for this one, this is one of their older titles. They made this one a few years prior to Toy Story 3, and I'm amazed at the difference in quality between the Toy Story 3 game and this. It's like, what were they? What? It's they fumbled so bad. And yet, in 2005, when I played this, I still enjoyed myself. I was still very excited. I wanted to unlock Pendulum Mode. I saw all of the playable characters that you could play as when Player 2 was showing up on. When you play every level in Sagas, you would usually play as Goku, Vegeta, sometimes Gohan, and very rarely Piccolo. Just those 4 characters. I don't think there was even a single level where you could play as Trunks. No, wait, I think he plays Trunks in the history of Trunks levels. So those 5 were the main 5 that you could play as in the entire storyline, right? And when I was looking at, you could play everything as co-op, and that was very, very impressive for the time period. So if you were actually social and had a friend, you could actually play co-op, which is pretty fun. But the beat-em-up shtick, the aged look to how the game plays, even by 2005 standards, I doubt many people would be very impressed to play this game. But either way, it's still a fun time to be able to actually have a game like this where you can play co-op. And the set player 2 in the first stage was Piccolo with his Cape and Turban. And I think by this time, the only way you could play this Piccolo with the Cape and Turban was Budokai 3. I don't know if Budokai 3 came out yet in the States yet by this time. But in Budokai 3, you could play as Piccolo with the Cape and Turban. But prior to that, this was like the only way you could do it. So, Budokai 1, 2, the older games, Super Butoden, that didn't really get localization. Ultimate Battles did, and it had the Butoden look about it a little bit. That didn't have a Piccolo with the Cape and Turban either. So if you wanted Piccolo with the Cape and Turban, this was it until Budokai 3 came out, luckily, about a year or two later, or roughly around the same time. But at this precise moment, it was just crazy. It was just crazy to see all of the playable characters, but you couldn't pick them. You couldn't pick them. When you were playing single-player mode, you could not pick the player 2 character. You had to pick the player 1 characters, though. That was static. It wasn't like you could just say, oh, I can play as Piccolo or Goku. No, you had to play as Goku if you're playing player 1. So that was unfortunate. And I got to see all the various playable characters throughout the stages. You can see that Gohan was playable in a lot of levels with Vegeta, Piccolo was playable in a lot of levels with Goku, and Trunks and Future Gohan for the History of Trunks levels. You could play 2 History of Trunks stages, and Future Gohan was playable in it. There's 2 versions of Future Gohan. There's the version with Gohan with 2 arms, and then there's a version with Gohan with 1 arm. And I've mentioned this before plenty of times, and that Sagas, up until Sparking Zero's release, Sagas was the only game with a playable 1-armed Gohan. And that was like the only thing it had going for it. And now that's gone. Fortunately, now we don't have a reason to play this. Unless you just want to play through the story mode as Broly. Yeah? Oh, that's pretty fun. So, in Pendulum mode, after you beat the story, if you've suffered through the story and you beat the story, you unlock Pendulum mode, which lets you play as any character at any stage. But you're playing in hard mode, so good luck. A lot of the bosses, even Raditz, the very first boss, is going to beat your keister. If you play as anybody who can't transform, good luck. You aren't barely doing any damage at all to Raditz. It's going to be very, very difficult. You can play as Broly. He's already transformed into his legendary Super Saiyan form, so you could play as Broly, go in there, beat the crap out of Raditz as his legendary Super Saiyan. His damage is very high, it's very impressive, it's very, very fun to play as him. But you would want to play as the other playable characters, especially the ones that are only playable in Pendulum mode, such as Bardock, Tien, Yamcha, Krillin. You could play as those guys in Pendulum mode. They weren't playable in the main story mode as player 2 characters or anything like that, no. So if you wanted to play as those guys, you could, but any stage with a boss fight, which is most all of them, the bosses are going to beat your keister. They're just way too powerful for non-transformable characters. You have to transform to even be able to do damage to these guys. They're just crazy. They spam super attacks over and over and over. Their damage is insane. They will stun lock you into a combo until you lose all of your HP. It is very brutal. I would say that around 2005, Devil May Cry was already perfecting its combat engine. If you put kind of Devil May Cry beat-em-up combos, fast-paced fighting with some really good stuff going on in here, if we went back in and remade Sagas with some insanely awesome combination combos with all these characters, we could have an amazing beat-em-up on our hands. You know, the Dragon Ball in beat-em-up form, heck yeah, man. There's Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, which I actually really appreciate. I really love that game. That's a newer one that came out for the PS4 era, which is a little bit after my time, but the PS4 era is still pretty fun. Kakarot is the game I wish came out for the PS2 and PS3 era. Kakarot is the game that I wish Sagas could have been, but in a beat-em-up form, because Sagas is a beat-em-up, it is, and Kakarot's more of a, it's more akin to Legacy of Goku than it is to Sagas, admittedly, so it's more about that than a beat-em-up. But I still believe in the possibility of getting a Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball beat-em-up game that isn't relegated to a mobile game or a handheld title. Even though there are plenty of great handheld titles, there's one of the very few Metroidvania style sticky side-scroller combat games that I actually liked on the GBA, which is Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure. I actually really liked that game, and it was a side-scroller. I normally don't care for side-scrollers, but I loved that one. It was very fun, very fun. And another one that was a very good beat-em-up in the style of classic arcade fighters like the TMNT game and the X-Men game, and the Simpsons one. You know these arcade fighters that I'm talking, these arcade beat-em-ups that I'm talking about, right? Streets of Rage. If this is coming back to you at all, please. There's a game called GT Transformations, which was a beat-em-up side-scroller shtick, and it was fantastic. I was surprised how good that game was. Very fun. Very, very fun. But the idea of a full 3D beat-em-up, it needed it. It could have done it. Dragon Ball could have made a very fun beat-em-up, but Sagas isn't it. It's not it. Unfortunately, it's not it. It has the potential, though. The idea is in there. It's hidden in there, but behind poor combat mechanics. Everybody's copy-pasted the exact same moveset with some minor differentiations. For example, Future Gohan with one arm as a moveset that only incorporates one arm, so that's very fun. That's very interesting. That's very unique. Everybody else, though, fights the exact same way. They have the exact same stance when you're walking around, you're running around. Everybody runs and walks the exact same way. There's no differentiation in movement. There's no differentiation in any of that. A lot of their special attacks are the exact same ki blast, just recolored. It's very disappointing. I really, really wish they put another year or two in the development of this game to release it maybe on... You know what? You should have released this in 2008 to 2009 on the PlayStation 3. You should have gotten the dev kit for the PlayStation 3. You had the core combat design and idea by 2005, but in an extra 3-year development time for a dev kit for the PlayStation 3, you could have made an actually decent beat-em-up. You could have done it. Unfortunately, you didn't. And Sagas ends up the disappointment that it is today. And I hate that it's a disappointment. You see that I still own this copy. I love this copy. I love the potential of a beat-em-up for Dragon Ball. It's in there. It's hidden in here. The idea, the potential to be one of the greatest beat-em-ups that I could have ever played in an alternate reality where they actually made a good game. Sadly, just not this one.